And my name is Connie Gray with Focusing Families. I am the child advocate, and children's program director, as well as primary prevention program director at Focusing Families. I've been there 2.5 years. Took the job. Everyone asked me why I did that, and I said I took the job. The position opened up, and I said, "Why? Sure, why not?" I would been a housewife for about 5.5 years. Due to our own tragedy in our own family, some things had happened that I needed to come home. So I came home and was a mom, and I stayed at home and did the mom thing for about 5.5 years, and I loved it, and it was a healing moment. But this job, through a couple more tragedies, opened up, and it really saved my life. And I really didn't know at the time when I took the job that it was going to actually save my life and change my life. But to go further back into my background, my husband and I for 15.5 years were, worked in group homes. So we were group home parents at Boys Town in San Antonio. We were group home parents at Presbyterian Children's Services in Waxahachie, Texas. And we also did that in North Carolina. So I'm going to let you know that my favorite people to work with in working with the teenagers that we lived with was my CASA volunteers.
Yay!
I
like to hear that.
I love CASA workers only because you have access to the kids and you're their voice. And if I needed something done, I got my CASA worker involved. If my caseworkers weren't doing what I needed them to do, I called my CASA workers. I made very good friends with CASA workers, so I am excited that you guys are on board. I really hope you guys take on that role of advocate and just fight for your kids, because society's been fighting against them for a long time, and you get to come along and fight with them. So I'm excited for that. So that's a little bit of my background. This part of my work, I'm not a victim of domestic violence. Thank God. I've been married to my husband for 22 years, have 3 amazing children, and a grandchild, and I have 2 grandchildren. One went to be home with Jesus, and so that changes you. So we're going to talk about the effects of domestic violence on children. And when I took this job again, wasn't that familiar with domestic violence. I knew the effects of what happens when kids are in kind of these situations and rough situations, but I really didn't understand anything. So, but the next, you can go to the next slide, is I saw this quote and I said, "You are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth." And so we are the thing that will propel them forward. I always tell people my kids will stand on my shoulders and go further and higher than I ever will if I prepare them, if I give them a good foundation. And so if you don't have those kind of parents, and a lot of these kids don't, that's what you guys do. And you get to shoot them forth and hopefully into a much better future where they can break some of these chains and these cycles. And we talk about kids subject to violence in their homes so that we may improve their lives. You have to talk about the violence that's going on. If we don't talk about it, the 2 on this, those are my daughters. I just love that picture because they were volunteering for me at the summer reading program. So anyway, I put that in there because that's why I do what I do. Those 2 girls right there is why I do what I do. But we have to talk about the violence. If we don't talk about it, we kind of do our kids a disservice when we don't talk about it. We make it sound like it's not important. We make it sound like we invalidate it. We make it small. And they're thinking about it. They lived it. They're in it. They are fighting against that. They don't know what's all inside of it. And if we don't talk about it, then we minimize it and make it small. And then they're just like, well, this is just how it's supposed to be. So it's important that we talk about it. I tell my moms who are coming out of domestic violence, you have to talk about it. Not talking about it, just because they didn't see it doesn't mean they didn't hear it, smell it, see the effects of it. You can't not talk about it.
And then it just manifests later some other way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I hate sweeping stuff under the rug.
Absolutely, yeah, me too. I told my brother today. I know. I told my brother, he says, why? I said, so why? You could just stick your head in the sand and let them kick your, well, I won't tell you what I said, but, because your head's in the sand, your butt's in the air, and that's what they're doing. They're just kicking your butt, and that doesn't make any sense at all. Let's confront it and deal with it. Because your kids want that. That's what they need to talk about. But there's ways to do it that is nurturing and caring and supportive, so. Obviously, 1 in 3 children who witness their partner violence reported being physically abused themselves. So it doesn't usually just stop with the moms, and unfortunately our moms who, and I read some of the most horrific stories during this research. I said, oh my God. Because moms, when they're getting abused, tend to turn on their kids because they don't have any control over what's going on to them, and they're frustrated and they're tired of being beat up, and their kids are being kids, and unfortunately they're going to turn on their kids. If not that, then the dads will use that as a weapon, use their children as a weapon against them, and they do that a lot as well, unfortunately. So 1 in 3 kids, 1 in 3 children are going to be, will have reported the abuse that has happened to them as well. Okay. Life shouldn't be scary, but it is. More than 5 million in the U.S. This is just this last year's stats. This isn't over a decade. This is within the last year. So more than 5 million U.S. children were exposed to physical intimate partner violence. And 1 million children were exposed to serious violence, which is the kicking, the slapping, the hitting, the choking. So you're talking about IPV, just regular IPV, intimate partner violence. You're talking also about your emotional abuse, your verbal abuse, all that other just walking on eggshell abuse.
Sorry.
But then you have the serious violence. That's when the physical stuff comes in. So a lot of people, when you hear intimate partner violence, you're like, well, what is that? They usually go right into smacking them around. And it's so much scarier.
What did you say IPV stands for?
Intimate partner violence.
Intimate partner.
It used to be family violence, it used to be domestic violence. Now we've turned it into intimate partner violence because when you see domestic, you think man-wife. I'm going to show you a slide in a little bit where it is not just man-wife. Unfortunately, we live in a society, fortunately, I have no opinion one or the other. I do, but I don't expose that to you. But 4.3 million were exposed to also the psychological and the emotional of IPV. So that's a lot of kids. That's a lot of kiddos exposed to life-changing trauma. Life-changing trauma.
Is that on top, I'm sorry, but was that on top of the 5 million? Mm-hmm. So 9.5 million.
1 in 3 women will be exposed to intimate partner violence. So 1 in 3 women. And most of those women have children under 12. Unfortunately, these men or women, and I show this that it crosses gender, but use getting the woman pregnant to keep them. Mm-hmm. So that a lot of them, we've had women in shelter with 6, 7, 8 kids, and they're just, you're like,
Yeah.
But if they use it as a tool,
Yeah.
a lot of the time it was just, well, I'm just going to keep you, you're pregnant, now you're pregnant again, and so they just use it as a tool, unfortunately, and so the kids are really exposed to that, and a lot of times they're under the age of 12. We in shelter, we can't take them under the age of 12, unless if they're males, because we're in an all-women shelter, so a lot of times we get kids with mothers with 6, 7, 8 kids. So that makes for a very interesting shelter life.
I would imagine.
But I wanted to just say this because I get this question a lot, well, can women be violent as well? But absolutely, women obviously get a lot of the attention. Men can be victims of domestic violence as well. I know myself, and I know myself inside of my nasty self, and I know what I can do to my husband very, very well. I know how to push his buttons, I know how to expose his weaknesses, and I know how to get what I need out of him. And so I've had to, when I got into this work, I was like, oh God, I was a batterer in my former days, so I really, not meaning to, but I was like, geez. So I really had to kind of concentrate on some of that to really understand that women can be just as violent as men.
Don't you think that it just doesn't get reported either? Because
Oh, absolutely.
It's
It's a stigma. It's very, very stigmatizing, and that's what the next point raises up, is because not only does it cross your same-sex genders as well, your same-sex partnerships. Unfortunately, they really get, but then they get really stigmatized.
Yeah.
Because then, they're gay couples and
Right.
they're not supposed to have those kind of issues, and a lot of them do. So they don't get, a lot of them, they just go unserved. They don't ask for help, or if they do ask for help, they're really ostracized.
Yeah.
Do they get the same attention for it, you think, with the police and the, no? So
No.
I think why bother, I guess.
Absolutely. Even in our own work, we've had to really had a lot of training. We've had to have a lot of training on how to be all-inclusive to your same-sex genders and your same-sex partnerships, and there's just a lot because, it is a stigma. It is something that society has not, may not ever, whatever the reasons may be, embrace, but there's still violence, and unfortunately, there's still children involved with
That's
these.
right.
So those are the victims that we're really trying to go after. So definitely keep an eye out for those as well and get them help, especially your men. Men will not. I've been here 2.5 years. I've seen maybe 2 men that have come in, and even then they would not call themselves a victim.
Yeah. We've had one case, I may have mentioned it in the prior training, we had a male victim of domestic violence. And long story short, the mother had admitted to stabbing every boyfriend she'd ever had. We did not terminate her rights, but we ended up giving custody back to the father, who was an illegal alien. He was not here legally. So that was also a factor of him coming forward. But his son ended up being returned to him, and we had it to where the mother she only had visitation rights at a supervised visitation center, where she would have to pay to have visits. She was to have no contact with the dad, and this was a Hispanic family, and so it was even more so
Right. That's right.
that the man is supposed to be the strong one. So it's really reversed, so it can happen.
And I honestly, I think it happens more than they say that it doesn't, because again, you're dealing with the man box. Oh, men aren't supposed to be,
Right.
But we also teach our men don't hit women.
That's right. That's exactly what I was going to
You know.
say. Is you're taught don't hit a woman, don't hit a woman, but you have a right to defend yourself. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always say children should be counting blessings, not bruises, and almost half the children who witness domestic violence intervene in some way. So that's either they're going to yell to stop it, they're going to get in the middle of it, or they're going to call for help. And a lot of them will try to get away. But I question this one a little bit because I have kids who'll just try to get right in the middle of it. They'll try to stop dad from hitting mom, or try to just stop it. So either way, they're intervening in the violence, and if they're not intervening, they're definitely hearing it. So from a child's perspective, hostile, abusive, or neglectful behavior targeted at the child directly by a parent or adult in the home. So I have a lot of women say, well, they didn't hear it. Well, it's still there. And then it is being directed. Kids are either going to be the targets, or they're going to be the tools, or they're going to be the weapons with which they're used. So it gets really, really
Don't you
nasty.
think that's just a parent trying to deny the effect on the child? I mean,
Well, even if the children are not home when it's happening, they're still getting less of a parent, because that parent is still in survival mode and can't focus all they need on the children, so they're still affected.
Absolutely, and then you can't hide a bruise, black eye, broken teeth, broken arm. You can't hide that stuff.
Do you know how many children who witnessed abuse turn around and be abusers? Did y'all go there?
We will, but yeah. I mean, we definitely will hit that because it's definitely a cycle, and those will come in here in a little bit. But yeah, absolutely, because I'll show that to you. I put this children's direct exposure to acts of violence between adults in the home as in the case of seeing, hearing, or smelling. And I know that sounds strange, but a mom whose nose got bloody, they know. The kids, we act like they don't know. We think that we're protecting them by putting them in their room. And kids know. I mean, you can't hide a black eye. You can't hide a broken nose. You can't hide those things. So to say that they're not being affected by it is just, it's almost insulting to me, to a child, because that says that you're not smart enough to figure out what's going on. And I honestly, I know they're trying to protect them, but not talking about it has just made it worse. So,
We talked about the smell thing before, and that, in my situation, that's how it was. When I came home and I smelled that, I knew what had happened.
absolutely. Yeah, there's just a feeling, you know, kids are amazingly brilliant. There's things that they'll say to me and I'm like, how do you know that? Not my, just any kid, you just ask them any question and they're amazing.
Very observant.
They're amazing. Children, and then their indirect exposure. So the bruises, the broken objects, the distressed parent, the crying mom, the one crying in the corner. They see all
You know what
that.
I think one of the biggest lies spoken is kids are just so resilient. Because I think that just that's just a big lie. Kids are not resilient. They still are going to have the effects of those things.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
We could show the next slide. So I asked you to walk a mile in their shoes. So we're just gonna kind of, and I put danger. So I say danger is in that they're often the intended victims of one or the both of the parents. Other times they get caught in the middle and are hurt or killed by accident. So there's this constant state of danger. You don't know what's coming next. So they're constantly on a fight or flight mode. They're constantly like, okay, am I gonna get hit? Am I not gonna get hit? Is my mom gonna get hit, or is this gonna go bad? So there's just this constant height of awareness. They don't ever get to relax. And then I put chaos. Just think of the chaos. They never know what they're gonna expect when they get home. They don't know what the parents' moods are gonna be in. Is daddy gonna come home drunk tonight, or is he not gonna come home drunk tonight? You know? And so they just, this chaos, this constant, just imagine the biggest adrenaline rush ever and never coming off of that. And that's what a lot of these kids and moms are living through. The fear and the tension, so it's the daily anger and the violent living nightmare for the children, and then they grow up just being afraid and trusting, not trusting anyone. Like, no one's gonna rescue them, so why should I trust you over my parents who I couldn't even trust? So confusion, they're just confused. The mixed messages. So an example is, at school they learn hitting is wrong, but at home they learn that hitting is the way to solve problems. So we teach them one thing at one place and something else, they're learning something totally different in the most powerful place where kids learn the most over and over. Isolation, a lot of times the abusive parent keeps them from having friends. They can't have, and who wants to have friends come over? You don't want friends coming over. You're like, no, I don't know if mommy's gonna be moving. So they just withdraw from their friends. And then the sense of hopelessness, and they blame themselves. I can't tell you in the number of kids that I've counseled, how many times they blame themselves. If I had just picked up my toys, if I had just done what he had asked me to do the first time, if I had just, and they just over and over and over again blame themselves. So there's this sense of just, it's my fault, I did this. Even if mom separates and goes away, it's somehow their fault. And kids will constantly say that to themselves. And then they have this love-hate relationship with their family. They love their family, they love their parent, but then they hate them at the same time. So it is a war inside of them. You guys will know this when you guys get there, is that a lot of abused kids want to protect their parents. They don't want to be the ones that tattle on them and get them in trouble. But they know that if they don't, then the violence will never stop. So it's really a detrimental thing to their development. So, and that's why I put this there. We are determined by our formative. So they're thinking that this is how their world is supposed to be until they moved and found out that they were different. So we ask, why do kids, why is it this way? Well, this is how they were taught. It's where the cycle of abuse comes in. If dad taught me that the only way to get my way with my wife was to beat her around, well, guess what they're going to do? They're going to do the same thing. So it is that cycle. It's just a continuous cycle. And our formative experiences teach us how to interact with the world. So I wanted to kind of go over, I did this power, we do power control wheels all the time. So you guys can kind of keep this. I have a better one on the back that I like very, very much. So, but this one is, so you guys can look over this and keep it for your references, but because I wanted to go into a little bit more detail with it. So we could go to the next slide, I think. Yes. So violence in the home, and I kind of gonna break it down into what infants, preschoolers, and adolescents kind of those. What are some of the signs and symptoms that you know that these kids have been in this? Infant. Some people are under an illusion that thinking that violence doesn't affect a baby because they're a baby. It's not true. There's lots and lots of research out there that supports that trauma affects even babies. They're not immune to it. So they may suffer from neglect, they may be abused. The other thing, they may be injured in the middle of the crossfire. So the mom's holding on the baby thinking she's protecting him, and then she realizes that man has no regard that she's holding an infant, that she's holding his baby, and he could still lash out at her regardless. And then so the infant gets hurt in the crossfire. Plus their basic needs for attachment are significant because mom's worried about not being hit. She's not taking care of a baby. She's not meeting the basic needs of what the baby's going to need. We work really a lot of parenting skills with our moms about, even if they have infants, is nurturing those children, realizing that you are responsible for that baby and you need to nurture it and love them and really bring them in close. Their routines are far from normal. I mean, I'm talking like simple things like bathing, feeding, sleeping. There is no normalcy. And that's what babies need. They need that routine. They need that constant guidance. And so if they're not getting that, there's no stability for that infant. And so they can't develop very well. Your parents aren't able, they're not sleeping, so they're not doing what they need to do. And so they let the baby cry, or they just let, because they can't handle the stress. Infants know that their parents aren't available to them. Don't ask me how they know that. They just do. They just do. They're irritable, they have sleeping difficulty, even a lot of diarrhea, and they're frequently ill. There's a lot of illness in these infants. And then developmentally, they just have language delays, like their bowing doesn't come as soon, and so just the normal things that reaching for things and their motor skills and that fine-tuning development isn't happening for lots of reasons. They're not getting the nurturing, they're not getting the stability, they're not getting that constant care that someone who's not worrying. And again, please understand, I'm not blaming the victim at all. She's just trying to survive. She's just trying to make it through. So I'm not blaming the mothers at all. I really want the violence to stop. But their children are suffering from the choices that they made. And they may show various social delays. They may not pay attention to new faces, or they may see frightened by new faces and surroundings. So to think that our babies aren't being affected, our babies are being affected. And then our infant toddlers and preschools, they're more aggressive. You're going to see a lot more aggression in your preschoolers than our normal. Look, I had a school call me today, second grader. He didn't just threaten suicide. He attempted suicide. He took something and put it around his neck and then said he wanted to cut off his hands. And I'm like, he's in second grade. Please explain to me how that's okay. Because the school's like, well, what should we do? I'm like, calls. I'm really glad you're on the phone, so please, they're second grade. That's not normal. It's not normal for anybody, but a second grader that wants to die is kind of significant to me. So you're going to see a lot more aggression.
So who should they have called?
Well, I told them that they, hopefully CPS was being involved. Because there's something going on, but I did tell them to have the grandparents, because the grandparents are the ones that are concerned. So I told them to call us. So have them referred to us so that we can get with that kid as soon as possible. We were going to get with either the sexual assault coordinator, or I was going to get with them and assess them and just see where they're at, because there's got to be something going on.
Okay.
Kids don't just make that up,
Right.
They just don't say that to me. They're more withdrawn. They have impaired cognitive delays and verbal development, poor motor skills, fearfulness and anxiety, stomach aches, nightmares, lack of bladder and bowel control over the age of 3. Babies obviously don't know how to do that anyway, but if you're over the age of 3 and you don't have control of yourself, there's probably something going on. Lack of confidence in new tasks, reluctance to leave parents, and irritable. So I'm giving these things to you, and I have them also here so you guys can have them. Because if you know those kinds of things, you can kind of start digging into more and asking more questions. If you're seeing some of these things, you don't want to just accuse people, but if you're starting to see some of these and there's a pattern of behavior that's going on, you can start asking more questions so that you know what to do next, so you know how to help them. School-age children is obviously learning difficulties, poor grades, learning disabilities. I asked this question a lot when I was working at the group home, because I had a problem with over-medicating kids. Because every kid I came into had some kind of bipolar, some kind of neurosis that was requiring them to be on meds. And I always asked this question. I said, really, or is it trauma? Really, or is it trauma? Because I said, I bet you're going to find that that's trauma and not a learning disability, or social, or a neurological thing that's going on with them. So ask these questions, because a lot of times we were at a school doing a presentation and we had a girl outcry of one of the most severe sexual assaults I've heard in a long time. Her father raped her, got her pregnant, got her an abortion, gave her an STD, hid it, threatened to kill her. Just anything that you could possibly imagine this child has gone through. She outcried to us, which I thought was so brave. And in talking to her teachers and in talking to her mom, she's like, oh my God. Because when they started putting the timeline together, she was diagnosed with learning disabilities, she was diagnosed with severe mental disorders, and it wasn't that. She was being sexually assaulted by her father. And if they had stopped and asked the right question, maybe they would have gotten her help sooner, instead of blaming it on something else. We have to stop and ask the right questions. We have to ask the right questions. We can't just assume that these, we don't want to assume and look under every rock and think that a kid's being abused. But you guys are going to be dealing with that. These are the kids you're going to be dealing with. So there's lots of resources out there. And then your teenagers, obviously, you got your poor grades, your low self-esteem, refusing to bring friends home, stays away from home or feels responsible and has to take care of the family. I get that a lot. I have to, especially for my older kids that have younger brothers and sisters, I have to be the one to take care of them. If I don't take care of them, nobody's going to. And they form their whole life around that. I have my daughters have a really good friend that they're friends with right now that we're trying to intervene because she's like, I have to stay close to home. She wants to be an actress and a singer, and she has amazing talent to do that, but she's going to stay close to home. So she's limiting her future so that she can protect her family. And that's just scary to me. There's lots of runaways, violent outbursts, rage, poor judgment, destroying property, immaturity, a lot of sexual acting out. There's a lot of sexual acting out because they're trying to feel that closeness to somebody. We're all freaking out because they're all having sex. Well, yeah, they're just trying to feel something other than whatever they're feeling. Withdrawn, nightmares, ulcers, bedwetting, headaches, young men hitting their girlfriends, young women being hit by their boyfriends, and vice versa. I think that girls can be just as violent. And unfortunately, they're getting more so that way.
Yeah.
They join in the violence against the adult. Your teenagers will start hitting on their moms because that's what they're seeing their dad do. They lose all respect for their moms and their parents. Or they turn the violence onto the battering parent. So you'll see the son shooting the father. You'll see those kinds of things that are going on. So does it sound like kids you've ever dealt with?
Mm-hmm.
I honestly, when I think about, I do think that kids can just be abused. But I think that it always goes hands in hand with intimate partner violence. I think that it starts somewhere up in that whole range. So we want to just always be very, very mindful of that. Effects based on gender. Boys are learning that males are violent. That's what they think. That this is that cycle. They think that this is normal, that boys have to be violent. Unfortunately, our society tells them that that's what they're supposed to be. If you're going to be angry, the only way you can be angry is to be aggressive. And so that's reinforced at home. They learn to disrespect women. Unfortunately, our society reinforces that as well, but they definitely learn it at home. Because they're constantly being taught. I had one case where the mom was tied up with chains and the kids were supposed to beat the mom with chains. Because that's what the father wanted them to do. So they've learned very, very quickly that this is how you deal with this. They use violence in their own relationship just to get the power and the control. Because again, it's not about the violence, it's about power and control. Those abusers, batters, I don't care, male or female, all they want is power and control, and that's what it's about. So if they can gain that power and they can gain that control, I had one case, he never laid a hand on her, but she was terrified. She didn't know, she was terrified. She was not gonna move. She thought, I'm going to die. He never laid a hand on her because he knew how to use terroristic threats. He knew how to use his verbal persuasion. He knew to use his emotional abuse, and he never had to lay a hand on her. I'm like, whoa, that is scary. The confusion and insecurity about being a man, there's just a lot of that. This is what a man looks like? I don't know that that's, it's really confusing and really terrifying. And then they attack their parents or their siblings. And as far as women, they learn that male violence is normal. This is what I'm supposed to expect for a man. So if he hits me, that's what I get. He loves me.